Foreman and Jason Tiffer. They are with Borderless Access Panels, and they're here to talk about what the big fish can learn from the small fish. They both have extensive experience in market research, many years across many continents, and a variety of industries. So with that, welcome.
Thank you. Have a clicker. There, great. So for those of you who chose this room, you made the right choice. So thank you for staying. We'll probably rush through this, I think. The presentation is it's born out of us just sort of kicking some ideas around, where I suppose the overriding question is, are some of the challenges that the market research industry facing similar to those of Big Pharma? And if so, which ones? So we've I guess, well, Jason's done an MBA, so we've pulled together a quadrant chart. You'll see there's a few complicated charts that come up. This is probably the easiest, at least it's one that I understand. So we're going to just kind of pick out a few of these different areas. But, I mean, firstly, I guess we all know this, it's all about the insight. And that's what we're searching for, whether that's specifically related to healthcare, whether that's more generally insights and the opportunity around the whole research industry. But the insight on its own, it doesn't really mean a lot unless it can be turned into something impactful. But ultimately, it's all about the money. So I guess it's probably appropriate then to move on to kind of how big's the industry. So the market research industry, you could argue that it's pretty big, $40 billion, or you could say, actually, that's not that big at all compared to pharma. But 40 billion means that if this was a Fortune 500 company, it would rank about there. And you pulled out a...
Yeah, that's like the GDP of Panama.
Panama, yeah, okay.
Right?
So, some people argue that actually it's not 40 billion, it's more like 60. But either way, it's not that big compared to pharma. Yeah, in fact, we were chatting to a guy from Baxter, Tim Robinson, and the market cap of Baxter is 40 billion. So, we've got some kind of different reference points. Market research is definitely the small fish.
Absolutely, Dan, and thank you for the segue. In regards to what we're looking in reference to the intersections of insight in terms of infrastructure, technology, and population growth globally, it's really the focus of what we do as an organization, right? We're always looking of thinking outside and then going back within the organization. In terms of where we look at the global space is, you have to go where the fish are, right? The largest spend in terms of buyers globally is the US, with over 55% of market purchasing in terms of the pharma industry coming from the US. In terms of market research spend, you're looking at 80% between the US and Europe, okay? Having said that, there's actually a bigger area that you have to focus on in terms of revenue opportunity, and that would be in the emerging hard-to-reach markets. Although the largest pharma market size is the US, the largest pharma marketing growth is coming from the emerging hard-to-reach markets globally, where that potential revenue spend is available. They're more on the far emergent side as opposed to the developed side when you're thinking of the pharma space. In regards to the numbers for pharmagents, in reference to the emerging markets, they're not there yet on the developed side, but it is something that is going in a linear trajectory. They will get there. It's just something that is still not at that level that you see in the US, in Japan, and in Europe as well. Now, in terms of insight collection methodology, obviously quantitative is still the bread and butter of the majority of what research companies do. Online, obviously, is the preferred method, but there's also, other opportunities for qual and so forth, but still to this day and age, we're looking at online quant as the preferred choice.
And also, it's fair to say this is an average which, in some senses, makes it a meaningless average. So if you take online and face-to-face, if you cut these figures around some of those emerging markets, face-to-face can be above 50%, 80% in some instances, such as Indonesia.
Correct. Now, in regards to mass market research access, right? I know that this has been a topic that's been discussed earlier this morning in terms of mobile. Obviously, mobile is going to be the next sexy innovation that's going to be out in the market research industry, but no one has come up with that innovation yet, right? There's limitations with mobile. You can only have a limited amount of questions. You can't upload grids. You can do JPEGs, you can do video trace, you can do audio trace, but you still can't get that robust quant platform onto a tablet, onto a smartphone device. So given that, we have to come up with other ways of reaching out to the masses, right? In terms of market access, which is big, the two top ones are still from preferred vendor lists and also word of mouth from either your colleagues or from other individuals in the industry.
And this is pretty consistent with my experience both buying and selling into pharma and, I mean, more generally across all verticals. You know, it's also perhaps quite instructive that, you know, we're up here, you're talking at an industry event, and you see, you know, the relative influence of these kind of events for really impacting decision, you know, it's pretty low. And you know, it also means that, you know, if you're a new player, then it's pretty hard to, you know, get onto that preferred supplier list. So that's why you see a lot of companies, you know, partnering with others. And if you're not best in class, then you partner with somebody who perhaps is best in class, who's already on one of these lists, and you're kind of partnering to build some credibility or buy some credibility from elsewhere.
Absolutely. And then in terms of pharma access, obviously payers, healthcare organizations, and hospitals are still the ones that are leading the growth within the next 5 years and going forward.
The blind man.
Yes.
Yeah. So big insights. Big data has come up so much. I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with the Gartner chart, and you could almost run an entire conference or a series of webinars on any one of these things, and also look at that, you know, relative to the pharmaceutical industry, relative to, you know, any vertical. You could just, you know, spend forever, you know, whether you're picking out cloud computing, NFC. You can see the opportunities for, you know, this industry and for the market research industry overall. And, you know, I think it's kind of quite instructive that, I guess this is a year or so, I think what we're hearing today is that big data is kind of slipping down towards this trough of disillusionment. And, you know, who knows? I mean, yeah, pharma, there's some massive data sets. You know, who knows whether we are going to get to that plateau of productivity, or it'll just kind of die out because, you know, we've always had plenty of data, as people have said. Now, this has come from A.T. Kearney. Yeah, it's pretty complex, but fairly typical of what a healthcare analytics program might look like. You know, we've got tons of different data sources. There's all sorts of processes that we're going through. We're analyzing stuff in loads of different ways. We're reporting it out. We've got loads of different stakeholders. You know, is it any surprise that it's difficult, that you use companies that have already been evaluated and procured and put onto a preferred supplier list? Because, I mean, it's a hard chart even to understand, let alone think about beginning to land in an organization. You know, so we've got some massive challenges, and perhaps it's no surprise then that, you know, we do have, on the previous chart, all this stuff going on, because, you know, we're looking for all sorts of different ways of how we can make sense from all this structured and unstructured data to deliver to all these different stakeholders in an organization. It's then even more compounded when we look at the market research industry specifically, and I guess there's a little bit of a focus on some healthcare businesses in here too. We've got some massive brands, we've got tons of different panel businesses, analytics. You know, some of the companies that are mentioned on this slide are, you know, here at this event. You could, you know, argue a case for, you know, taking an organization, you know, like Borderless and pushing them also into the tech space. You could say the same for Lieberman. You know, there's tons of just kind of challenges in terms of even trying to explain this stuff. And again, what about integrating that with the previous slide? You've got all these different stakeholders, and then you've got all these different people that are going to kind of argue about their, you know, strong brands, their blockbuster brands, and yeah, it's a big challenge.
It extremely is. And then how they intertwine amongst themselves as well, because at some point in time, all these organizations have either worked with each other directly or indirectly. So it just shows how that correlation goes across many organizations through the industry.
Yeah. And then payments by results. I think in the market research industry, I think there's been an eagerness, and perhaps there's a little bit more momentum now to try and justify the value of an insight, to use the benefit, the contribution, the impact that an insight can have, or a piece of research, and share the risk, share the success of some good quality research, some great insights. Start to build that towards some kind of value-based or outcome-based payment system. We see it work reasonably well, for example, in the world of advertising and some marketing models, but it's early stage for the market research industry. But for sure, if anyone could crack that, we believe it would be very valuable. So we all know the value of a big brand and that marketing works. In the slides here, they speak for themselves. I think even in the insight space, if you take, I don't think they're here, so I can shout them out. If you took, for example, a Millward Brown Link product, there's probably just as good advertising evaluation systems out there, very generically, but nobody got fired for hiring IBM. And I think there's a lot of value in that, in the support and the credibility that the big brands have. So that that's true for both industries.
Absolutely.
And then final thought. Some of you will be familiar with this wonderful image. Now the story behind this is an Indonesian monkey. He stole the camera from a wildlife photographer and took a selfie. And the guy, he entered it for the Wildlife Photography of the Year awards. And in the end, the judges decided that this didn't count because the photographer, he didn't take the photo, it's the monkey took it himself. And I think there's some kind of, so what it proves is basically if you put the technology in the hands of the animal, they can take a much better photo than you can take as a professional photographer. But maybe there's a learning there for us as researchers. There's tons of DIY applications around. We now, in this era of the smartphone, we put that technology into the patient's, the consumer's hands. Maybe the kind of research results that we're going to get back are going to be better. They're going to be the equivalent of these. So, especially mobile can touch everything. It can touch and address some of those challenges around all the emerging markets.
Absolutely.
So maybe, instead of fearing the monkey, you should become the monkey.
And also it's understanding, what are the cultural nuances within these parts of the world. Socio-economical, political, religious. They all have influences one way or the other in these respective markets, which is always something you have to keep in mind.
So don't fear the monkey, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you.
Questions?
First of all, very good presentation. The point about outcome-based payments, I know you said it's in its very earliest stages, but given the fact that from a marketing research agency or vendor's perspective, once the insight is uncovered, regardless of its brilliance, how that's used is oftentimes out of the market research hands. How might, in your mind, how might that work? How might a outcome-based payment system work?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair challenge, and if it was easy, someone would have done it. So, in my mind, it's just simply about determining the parameters around which you're going to allow the insight to be used. I think that should be agreed up front, firstly, because then, as you say, a lot will depend on, how that's landed in an organization. But I could imagine, and I'd certainly be prepared to do it myself, agreeing, here's a project cost, these are the kind of findings we're looking for, let's pay 60% fixed, and the other 40% is dependent upon a successful insight being generated and being used in the right kind of way. And on the upside, if the insight that's developed is even better, and when transformed and landed in an organization, it has even bigger results that we can prove, then I can make up to 40% extra. So I know my 60 is guaranteed, but then whether I earn 60 or 140, that's the kind of variation, but that's the shared risk.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We have time for another question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know you thought we were cutting you off there, but no.
Any other questions? Pretty straightforward.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
so
you all.
much.
Appreciate it.